Democrats, meanwhile, blasting the Senate investigation into Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his role on the board of a Ukrainian gas firm. They're calling it a purely partisan stunt, but our next guest has a simple question for those Democrats. If there's nothing there, what are they so worried about? Senator Ron Johnson is chair of the Homeland Security Committee, which authorized that subpoena. Senator, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Ed. You took the words out of my mouth. What are they afraid of?
So on that point then, sir, we all know it's an election year and Joe Biden is the likely Democratic nominee. What, in your view, is the legitimate investigative purpose that you are pushing here?
Well, again, our investigation into the things that happened in Ukraine date way back to a political article written right after the 2016 election that showed potential interference by certain actors in Ukraine, possibly members of the DNC, and it just blossomed into uncovering through news reports the fact that Hunter Biden got hired by a thoroughly corrupt oil company. Blue Star Strategies was hired by that corrupt oil company, and apparently used their connections, their former Clintonites, to bully the State Department, potentially Department of Justice, to potentially affect our attitude, our policy toward Burisma. So right. We're just asking the questions. If there's nothing there, fine, we'll get the information, we'll move on. If there's something there, I think the American people deserve the truth.
Well, we all know that Hunter Biden, the vice president's son, made a lot of money on the board of Burisma, the energy company, with no clear energy background and all of that. But that might just be, as you hear some of the Democratic Party say, sort of a swamp deal. It seems improper, you know, benefiting off of your father being in office, but people in both parties have done this before, as you know, not saying it's right. But do you have any hint that the former then Vice President Joe Biden, while in office, did anything at all improper that benefited his son?
Well, first of all, he admitted to basically a quid pro quo where he threatened withholding an IMF loan over $1 billion unless they would fire Victor Shokin. We continue to ask the State Department, on what basis was the State Department upset with Victor Shokin? Why do they want him fired? So I can't even get that answer. So again, we're just methodically going through our investigation here. And by the way, I didn't want to turn this into a big deal. It's Democrats that objected to my first subpoena of Andrei Teleshenko, and then when we were discussing that, when they delayed that vote, they said, well, if you want those records, why don't you just subpoena them from Blue Star? And I said, okay. On a bipartisan basis, they asked me to do that, so I did that, and then they had the hissy fit yesterday, accused our committee falsely that we are totally focusing on COVID, our oversight of that. That's primarily what we're dealing with. I would not have made this a big deal. I just would have issued the subpoena, got the information, added it to our report, and moved on. One
of the Democrats taking you on is Chris Coons, your colleague from Delaware. He was on with Martha McCallum last night. Here are his thoughts. I'll let you respond.
We ought to be focusing on the pandemic that has killed nearly 100,000 Americans and ground our economy to a halt. How do we get an appropriate safety standard so that small businesses can reopen and employees can get back to work? I frankly think that's the sort of thing we should be focusing on, not relitigating.
Now, clearly, Congress can do more than one thing at a time, and you've already passed several stimulus bills and whatnot to react to the pandemic. But answer that general charge that we're in the middle of an unprecedented crisis in America. Why, in the estimation of Democrats, are you pursuing something that looks partisan in an election year?
Well, again, that's what we are primarily focused on is COVID-19 and responding to that crisis. Ask the Democrats, what were they doing with their partisan impeachment? I think coronavirus was just flaring up at that point in time, and we were locked in the chamber there dealing with their highly partisan impeachment trial as well. So, again, their charges are ridiculous. We are primarily focused on this disaster, doing whatever we can to bring relief to workers and to businesses so we can reopen our economy. This is a disaster. It's an economic disaster, and there's an enormous human toll there. We're not ignoring that by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, there's an awful lot that happened, and the American people need and deserve the truth.
Got under 30 seconds, but if Hunter Biden just says, look, I'm not turning over these documents, what happens next in all this? What will you do? How far will you go to get this information, sir?
Well, first of all, this isn't Hunter Biden. This is a lobbying firm hired by Burisma, and in fact, to a certain extent, was working on behalf of Hunter Biden as well. But again, there are other ways of us getting these documents. So we could go back to Andrei Teleshenko. He's been very cooperative. Nothing he's told us has not proven to be true. So there's a number of ways we can get the information, and I'm determined to get it.
All right. Senator Ron Johnson, we appreciate you coming on with your views.
Have a great day.